a journey of 2 million years. That's a huge span of time, right? Well, today we're telling a story of how simple stone tools eventually gave way to massive, sprawling empires. And it all really boils down to one fundamental question.
All right, let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're tracking the absolutely incredible transformation of ancient India over thousands and thousands of years. We're going to follow that journey from the very first human tools all the way to the rise of these vast, super sophisticated empires. It's a story of innovation, powerful ideas, and, of course, power itself.
So our story starts way, way back, in what you might call deep time. We're talking about an era that wasn't defined by kings or kingdoms or any of that. Nope. It was defined by humanity's first and maybe most fundamental innovation, the stone tool. I mean, this was the piece of tech that kicked everything off. Now, when we say Stone Age, don't just picture one long, boring stretch of time. It's much better to think of it as an evolution in 3 acts. You've got the Paleolithic, or the Old Stone Age, and that one lasted for an immense amount of time. Then came the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, and finally, the Neolithic, the New Stone Age. And that last one, that's what really set the stage for, well, everything we think of as civilization.
So you're going to hear the word lithic a bit, and it's super simple. It just comes from the Greek word for stone, lithos. And because quartzite was such a common material for making these tools, the people of this era are sometimes called quartzite men. But just stop and think about that for a second. For literally millennia, the simple idea of shaping stone was the core technology. It powered all of human development.
And this seemingly simple technology, man, it unlocked this incredible arc of progress. At first, it was all about pure survival, right? Using these basic choppers and hand axes to hunt and gather. But then comes this huge leap forward. It's all about control. During the Mesolithic period, we see the very first evidence of animal domestication. And guess what the first one was? The wild dog. This whole journey culminates in the final, truly world-changing step, the Neolithic agricultural revolution. This is where humans go from just finding their food to actually producing it. That one shift, seriously, it made everything else possible. And that massive change, from finding food to growing it, well, it led directly to this. All of a sudden, you could have cities. And around 5,000 years ago, just a stunningly advanced civilization pops up along the banks of the Indus River. We're talking about one of the world's first great urban cultures. Now, to put this into perspective, the Indus Valley Civilization was around at the same time as ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. But here's the kicker. In a lot of ways, it was even more advanced. And what's wild is that for centuries, its existence was totally unknown to the modern world. It was a genuine lost civilization just waiting to be rediscovered. And when I say advanced, I mean it. Their cities were absolute marvels of engineering. We're not talking about a jumble of huts. We're talking meticulously planned cities built on a grid system. They had these incredibly sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, stuff that wouldn't be seen again for centuries. They had massive public buildings, like the famous Great Bath. They even used standardized burnt bricks for all their construction. You know what all of this points to? A society that was built on order, incredible planning, and just mind-blowing foresight.
And this wasn't just, a couple of cool cities. No way. At its peak, this civilization covered a staggering 850,000 square kilometers. Let me put that into perspective for you. That's bigger than modern-day France and Germany combined. This was a massive, sprawling, deeply interconnected culture on an absolutely immense scale.
It's the little details that really blow your mind. Like this fact about the covered drains. That is so revealing. It's not just about being a clever engineer. It's about having an advanced concept of public health. This tells us they were a society that cared about hygiene and civic responsibility. I mean, that is just completely ahead of its time.
So, for reasons we're still debating, the Indus cities eventually declined. And after that, a totally new era emerged. This time, the defining feature wasn't going to be bricks and mortar, it was going to be powerful ideas. We're talking about new philosophies and social orders that would go on to shape India forever. This brings us to the Vedic Age, which really laid all the intellectual and social groundwork for what we think of as classical India. Now, in the early days, society was mostly pastoral, tribal, kind of fluid. But over time, things started to change. Society got more complex, small tribes grew into large kingdoms, and that social structure that used to be so flexible, well, it started to become a lot more rigid. And right at the heart of this new social order was something called the Varna system. This idea, which is described in the ancient text of the Rig Veda, basically imagines society as a giant cosmic being. Each social class had a specific function born from a part of this being. You have the priests and scholars from the mouth, the warriors from the shoulders, merchants from the thighs, and laborers from the feet. This whole concept of a divinely ordered society became a super central and, as time went on, super rigid part of life.
But whenever a system becomes really rigid, you can expect challenges, right? And that's exactly what happened. New philosophies started to pop up, and the most prominent one was Buddhism. It offered a totally different path to spiritual liberation. It was centered on the individual's power to achieve nirvana, this ultimate state of enlightenment and peace, totally free from suffering. And how do you get there? By extinguishing desire.
So you might be asking, how could a person actually do that? Well, the Buddha's answer was pretty revolutionary for its time. He taught that anyone, and I mean anyone, it didn't matter what your social class was, could reach nirvana. All you had to do was follow this practical guide. The Eightfold Path wasn't about who your parents were or performing some complex ritual. It was a direct roadmap for ethical living and mental discipline, and it was accessible to everybody. Okay, so you've got these huge philosophical and social shifts happening, but they're not just happening in a vacuum. All this ferment and new thinking is setting the stage for the next great leap, which is the political unification of India under its very first great empires.
And here we go. In 322 BC, a man named Chandragupta Maurya founds an empire. And the Mauryan dynasty doesn't just grow, it explodes. It rapidly expands to become the biggest empire the subcontinent had ever seen. This timeline kind of lays out the key moments leading up to the reign of its most famous ruler, Ashoka the Great, and a single battle that would change everything.
That battle was the Kalinga War, and it was an absolutely brutal conquest. The human cost was just unimaginable. We're talking over 100,000 people killed. That number, the sheer scale of the slaughter, it seems to have triggered a deep, profound personal crisis for the guy who won, Emperor Ashoka himself.
And that personal crisis, it literally changed the course of history. Ashoka was apparently so consumed by remorse that he completely renounced violent conquest. Done. Instead, he embraced Buddhism and adopted a whole new policy of how to rule, not by the sword, but by what he called Dhamma, or moral law. And he didn't just keep this to himself. He had this new philosophy carved into pillars and rocks all across his huge empire. Think about that transformation, from a fierce conqueror to one of history's greatest advocates for peace.
Okay, so fast forward a few centuries after the Mauryas. A new dynasty, the Guptas, comes to power, and they usher in this amazing period of stability and prosperity. It became known as a golden age, a time of just extraordinary achievement in culture, in science, and in art.
And when we say achievements, the level of innovation is just staggering. I mean, the Gupta era gave the world concepts we literally cannot live without today. Things like the concept of zero and the decimal system. They made huge leaps in astronomy, figuring out the solar year. They made advances in medicine and metallurgy, and literature and art just flourished. But here's the key. These weren't just local achievements. These were ideas and technologies that would eventually ripple out and change the entire world.
So, what does this incredible journey, from a simple stone tool all the way to a sprawling golden age, really tell us? It's more than just ancient history, right? It's a timeless story about how technology, ideas, morality, and power all interact. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. What can the rise and fall of these ancient empires teach us about our own civilizations today?